Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to this open forum regarding the Polo Field. My name is Dave Berman, and I'm the Township Manager. I think I've met most of you. And tonight we're going to talk about, I'm going to make some introductions to the folks who are here to see you. We're going to give you just a very brief history, just so everybody's up to speed on where we are, how we got here. I'll talk about the public input we've received to date. We'll go through some of the more significant terms and conditions of the proposed agreement with Lower Merion Township. John Walco, our township solicitor, will talk about future ownership of Polo Field. Dave Pannoni is here, and also Chief Viola and Deputy Chief Joe Hagan to talk about the bus drop-off. And we'll talk about next steps after this meeting. And then we'll have basically the public forum, which will be your opportunity to say whatever it is you wish to say, add whatever it is you wish to add to the agreement, or make recommendations otherwise. So we also have Parks and Rec Director Brian Barrett and Eileen Matola, who unfortunately I didn't get on the list, but Eileen's our Deputy or Assistant Director of Parks and Recreation. I think I got everybody. Laura, did you want to say a few words?
Yes, thank you, Dave. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. We are at another crucial point in a long road as we've been considering this proposal. Dave's going to go through a little bit of what we've done over the last 2 years, but I can tell from looking at the faces in the room that we're all quite aware of where we've been, what we've done, how we've engaged, the issues and concerns that have come up. And what I want to say to you first tonight is thank you. Thank you for teaching me about Polo, helping me better understand the experience of the people who live in the neighborhood surrounding Polo, and most importantly, helping me understand when it was important to take a step back and think differently about things. This is a beautiful field, a historic field, and one that we hope through this agreement that we can improve significantly. We couldn't have done any of that without your help, and that's the purpose of this meeting tonight, is to hear your feedback on this draft agreement that we have sent out. So this is a fairly significant amount of transparency and engagement with the community. There's never enough. We can never do it exactly right. But I hope that we can hear from you tonight, get your honest feedback on the agreement, let us know how we can make it better, and we'll see what we can do. For me, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we're going to get somewhere that we can be happy with, but we're not there yet. And I've got staff here tonight so that we can dig into some of the questions you might have. Dave said, share your input, but I'm hoping that we can also answer some of your questions that may not have been clear from viewing the proposal, or there's other pieces that you want to talk about. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave. We have a PowerPoint. He's going to take us through the process, the agreement, the specific feedback that we got, and how we responded to it, and then turn it over to you for some questions. I just want to thank all the staff members who have put so much time into this, into making sure that what we come up with and then eventually what we execute is going to be for the benefit of the community, for the benefit of the park, and for the benefit of children that use it and the community surrounding it. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave and look forward to talking further.
So we've learned from the Historical Society and the folks who wrote some of the history of the Polo Field that the Bryn Mawr Playfield Association was incorporated in 1944, and they own the Polo Field, which is perpetually leased to Haverford and Lower Merion Townships. Haverford and Lower Merion have jointly operated the Polo Field for about 80 years, and it's for the use of the residents of both townships. In 1983, the townships entered into an agreement that relates to the maintenance, upkeep, and capital improvements to Polo Field, which this agreement that we're talking about this evening is intended to replace. So both townships recognize and acknowledge that the Polo Field has been covenanted and it's in perpetuity for regular use of the said premises as a playground, playfield, or park, and agree that such uses shall remain for the benefit of the general public and particularly the residents living nearby to Polo Field. So the current situation, and we've been through this, Lower Merion and Haverford share permitting and maintenance. Lower Merion typically permits baseball and softball after school during the spring and fall. Haverford and Lower Merion Townships split time in the evenings and the weekends. But to be clear, Lower Merion Township has the right to permit baseball and softball after school during the spring and fall seasons. When they approached us about this agreement, we've been working ever since trying to achieve the best possible agreement for the residents of Haverford Township. So their proposal, as you know, is for Black Rock Middle School to use the field for baseball and softball only during the spring season, after school, Monday through Friday, beginning in April of 2024. There's no other sports, no other teams, just baseball and softball. There's no change to the evening or weekend use proposed. There's no lights, no permanent fixtures, no sound systems, nothing like that has been contemplated as part of this agreement. And we have been assured that there is no change to the intensity of use. So we've had a lot of opportunities for public input. February 3rd of 22, we had that public meeting via Zoom. About a year later to the day, we had a public meeting at the CREC. We published an online survey in March of 23, and in the summer of 23, at least 8 of the 9 commissioners visited Polo Field with Commissioner Cavender and also with some of the residents. On an ongoing basis, we have received dozens of emails from residents, meetings with the Polo Field Task Force, regular email updates from Commissioner Cavender, smaller meetings with some of the Polo Field immediate neighbors, feedback and survey data received from the Polo Field Task Force of the Brentford Civic Association, and we've reviewed the agreement in public. It's been circulated, and here we are this evening. So thanks to the Polo Field Task Force, some of whom are here this evening, Jake Swan, Gail Lovett, Wendy McGarvey, Peter Landry, and Ken Sands. They've presented extensive survey data to Commissioner Cavender, reviewed the rules and regulations that we've put together as part of this draft agreement. They've provided input on aspects of park maintenance, use, and upkeep, and they've met with the township manager, the solicitor, the Parks and Rec director, and the Board of Commissioners president. So I put together a bunch of slides. I don't have everybody's comments, but I captured a bunch of comments that have been made at public meetings and that we've received in writing. So the neighborhood residents, these are just individual comments and opinions from individual residents. Neighborhood residents would prefer Lower Merion utilize the existing 36-foot right-of-way from County Line Road and drop students off in the existing parking lot. The consensus in Brentford is that we want to make sure that Lower Merion School District uses the Polo Field parking lot for student drop-off. There needs to be a limited and predetermined number of fields with a fixed layout for each season. Permitted activities must be constrained to these specific fields. The layout of the fields must allow for the safe and unencumbered passage of walkers, runners, and dog walkers around the perimeter of Polo Field. Others have said that this is a densely populated neighborhood. There will be increased traffic if additional sports teams play here. And
From the survey.
got that. This is from our survey. Railroad is too small of a road to allow school buses to load and unload students. I feel Lower Merion should have planned better when they build a new school and arranged to build fields as well. We don't want the extra traffic of buses, parents, etc. I've watched the lawnmowers need to pick up empty water bottles, etc. before they could even mow the fields. The Polo Field is a gem and has been recognized as such for years by many people. Children play, older folks meet here for socializing, young families have picnics with their children and friends. Teenagers who have no place to go have a safe place to connect. School buses could make a safe entrance at the existing entrance off County Line Road. Overall, I see the proposal as positive and a benefit to our community, but will require confirmation of Haverford Township increased commitment to care and maintenance. This is an opportunity which should not be wasted. Haverford Township should invest the time, energy, and money into getting the contractual details correct and provide maximal long-term benefit to township residents. The condition of the field is poor and needs continued investment. A one-time payment of $275,000 is a pittance for Lower Merion School District. My biggest concern is the lack of respect for the neighbors in the way of parking, excessive noise pollution, and littering. There should be a stipulation that if there are too many documented problems from the Black Rock Middle School programs, that we have the right to pull this agreement. Parking or standing of buses on Railroad Avenue should not be allowed. I worry about the buses dropping off and picking up, as well as increased traffic due to spectators watching the games. Most Polo Field neighbors and probably most commissioners knew little about Polo Field ownership until recently. Both townships did what they wanted for decades, including tearing down the clubhouse without interference from the real owner. Ownership has never been uncertain, as described recently. It was established legally in 1944 and has remained unchanged since then. Signing a potentially long-term agreement for Lower Merion to expand their township usage for Black Rock Middle School means Haverford Township will have even less control over the field as the minority users, even if they own it. Field users park cars illegally on Railroad all the time, and bus use would force these parkers into side streets. The fact is, there is no safe way to transport a lot of kids by multiple buses to the Polo Field given the narrow streets, the crowded neighborhood, the limited access road, and the heavy use of the field by other groups in the spring season. Okay for Lower Merion to use the field as long as it doesn't create traffic issues or prevent Haverford groups from using the field. I'm not opposed to the school using the diamonds on a temporary basis until they can resolve their issues in finding locations for their school's fields. I'm opposed to Black Rock using the diamonds and possibly the other fields indefinitely. These fields should be available for other Haverford Township, Lower Merion Township organizations. So these are the concerns that we've heard very generally. Haven't listed all of them, but we've tried to incorporate those into the draft agreements that have been negotiated so far. We also received survey results from an early survey that we did early in March of this year, and we asked folks whether they were comfortable with the current use of the field. About 8% said they never even noticed, but about 73% said they were comfortable with the current use of the fields, while almost 20% said there were too many fields in use by too many teams. We also asked if the residents were in favor of the proposed agreement that we've been talking about. About 60% said yes, it would be okay if we get the details right. 10% said yes, and almost 30% are not comfortable with the proposed agreement. No worries. So let's walk through the proposed terms and conditions briefly if we can. There's an Exhibit C to the agreement that talks about the repairs and maintenance of the field. And it's referenced in the agreement, and it talks about what Haverford Township would be responsible for and what Lower Merion Township would be responsible for. And it's pretty clear. Haverford will maintain the existing equipment, backstops, bleachers, protective fencing, and basketball court areas, and will replace items of capital equipment such as swings, backstops, bleachers, and basketball nets and standards as required. We'll maintain the parking lots, sidewalks, including snow removal. We'll remove any debris and trash dumped beyond that which would accumulate from the normal usage of the fields. Haverford will have overall responsibility for supervising the performance of standard maintenance items, and should third-party complaints arise relating to maintenance, each municipality will communicate with the other to resolve any issues. We will share with Lower Merion Township the cost of trimming and maintaining of trees, shrubbery, and hedges, and the cost of tree removal. Haverford and Lower Merion will designate one time period each spring and one time period each fall for work crews from each township to trim and maintain all trees, shrubbery, and hedges. Lower Merion will collect trash from the fields. Haverford will collect trash from the playground. Lower Merion will maintain and line the athletic fields and will perform mowing, aeration, seeding, fertilizing, cleaning up debris and trash from the normal usage and storm damage. So let's talk a little bit about permitting. First of all, there's an important sentence here that talks about Lower Merion giving priority consideration to any request of the Haverford Township Department of Parks and Recreation for seasonal permits. Special situation permits requested by Haverford Township for use of any athletic field area will be given priority over Lower Merion. Special situation permits shall be defined to include situation requiring the scheduling of a permit originally scheduled at another area and the scheduling of an event sponsored by the Township of Haverford. In all cases, every effort is going to be made to schedule the special activities of Haverford Township. So Haverford is going to have priority use and permit multi-purpose fields 1 and 3, 7 days a week from dawn to dusk. Lower Merion will have priority to use and permit multi-purpose field 2, 7 days a week from dawn to dusk. Haverford will have priority use and permit the softball field on Monday and Wednesday from 6 p.m. to dusk and on Sunday from dawn to dusk, and the baseball field on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 6 p.m. to dusk and on Sunday from dawn to dusk. Lower Merion will have priority to use and permit the softball field and the baseball field Monday through Friday from dawn to 6 p.m., on Tuesday and Thursday from 6 p.m. to dusk, and on Saturday from dawn to dusk. And this agreement goes on further to talk about the Lower Merion School District by way of the Black Rock Middle School being a permittee under the agreement. So we included a chart, and I can publish this later. I finished the PowerPoint today, so I'll get it published for y'all. I highlighted something in red on this document because it's an example of times when we make different arrangements with Lower Merion. So the Parks and Recs Department has the opportunity to address specific circumstances carefully. Originally, we had Lower Merion using the baseball field from dawn to dusk on Fridays, but due to our needs, Haverford Township will have access to that field for permitting purposes after 6 p.m. on Fridays. And it's just an example of the way we've pretty much always worked together. So parking. The agreement talks about school buses. School buses exceeding 25 feet in length shall provide for off-site parking of such buses or similar vehicles for the permittee's team and any visiting team. Lower Merion Township and the Lower Merion Township-based permittees shall provide for parking in Lower Merion Township or elsewhere for Lower Merion Township's permittees and the visiting team of the permittee, and are prohibited from parking buses in Haverford Township except under the agreed-upon use of the Polo Field parking lot. Buses shall not be permitted to idle in the Polo Field parking lot longer than reasonably necessary for dropping off or picking up passengers. So the term of the agreement that has been proposed is 10 years. Thereafter, unless A, this agreement is terminated prior to the expiration of any term, either by mutual consent of the parties or pursuant to other paragraphs in the agreement, or if Lower Merion provides Haverford with a written notice of non-renewal at least 120 days prior to the expiration of any term. The agreement would automatically renew for a new 10-year term. I'm going to look at our township solicitor to make sure I've explained that correctly.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Just to add that paragraph 10 is the breach of the agreement. So again, if there are the breaches of the agreement, which you'll be getting into now, that would result in an ability to terminate the agreement.
Thank you. So this talks about a material breach of the agreement. Then the non-breaching party shall issue upon the breaching party a written notice to cure the breach. So this is some of the comments that we've heard. Folks are concerned about things that we don't want going on at that field. How do we address it? So if, let's just say, Lower Merion breaches the agreement or a permittee breaches the agreement, we would then issue a notice to cure the breach. For any material breach which will require the repair of damage beyond normal wear and tear, including damage to the fields, the breaching party shall be afforded a reasonable amount of time to effectuate those repairs based on the nature of the damage and availability of labor and materials. So for any other material breach, the breaching party shall be afforded 45 days from the date of notice to cure the breach. So we came up with I'm going to continue with a breach. If the breaching party does not cure the material breach or as circumstances dictate, make reasonable progress to cure the breach within those specified time periods, then the non-breaching party may declare a default of the agreement and terminate the agreement. So upon termination, the agreement shall cease, effective immediately, and the non-breaching party shall be entitled to enforce the agreement by an action brought in equity, including injunctive relief, and/or we could pursue civil damages for any damages, losses, expenses, et cetera, that are required to remedy the breach to enforce termination of the agreement. For the purpose of this paragraph, it's mutually understood by and between the parties that they are responsible for and accountable under the agreement for the conduct of their permittees. So Lower Merion Township will be responsible for the conduct of their permittees, and likewise, we are responsible for the conduct of our permittees. Let's go ahead. We also understand that the parties mutually understand that nothing in the paragraph is intended to limit or waive the parties' rights to file an action for declaratory or injunctive. This is all legalese that we don't really need to get into. But what's important is to understand just examples of what we consider to be a material breach of the agreement. And this is a pattern of failing to perform the maintenance responsibilities set forth in that Exhibit C that we talked about. It's causing significant damage left unrepaired beyond normal wear and tear to Polo Field. It's a pattern of issuing permits for the athletic fields beyond the permitted times that we've already talked about. It's a pattern of failing to enforce any permit requirements, including, I'll get back to Exhibit D. It's a pattern of allowing permittees, licensees, and invitees to violate the rules and regulations of Polo Field. It's a pattern of allowing permittees, licensees, and invitees to violate Haverford Township ordinances regarding noise, alcohol, disturbance of peace, or parks and playgrounds. Another example would be a pattern of allowing permittees, et cetera, to block vehicular circulation in and around Polo Field, including but not limited to incidents arising from improper parking or violations of the bus parking requirements that we just talked about. The pattern of failing to enforce the capacity limits for Polo Field and its facilities, including but not limited to parking and traffic, so as to create health and safety issues. It's failing to make full payments of any amounts due under the agreement for services of maintenance and other improvements. So the agreement contemplates that once executed, Haverford Township would be the owner of Polo Field. John, would you mind talking briefly about how the ownership of Polo Field would occur?
Sure. So as was mentioned, currently the polo fields are owned by the Bryn Mawr Playfield Association, which was created as a Pennsylvania nonprofit corporation in 1944. It has a charter and is incorporated as such. The association's charter established a 5-member board for that organization. That 5-member board was a director that was designated by Haverford Township, a director designated by the school district of Haverford Township, a director designated by the Lower Merion Township Commissioners, one that was designated by the initial grantor of the property, who has long since passed away, and a director designated by the Bryn Mawr Horse Show Association, which is now a defunct organization, has been for some time. So of those 5, there are 3 potentially active parties that could still make their appointments still today to designate who they're going to be the director of the Bryn Mawr Playfield Association, make those designations the school district, Lower Merion, and Haverford. Those 3 people so designated could then call a special meeting, At that special meeting, they could then vote to appoint 2 other persons to that organization, and then could immediately proceed to vote to transfer or sale the property to a party. And it's expected and believed, and this agreement is in line to have that party be Haverford Township. So it could happen quick, it could all happen at the same meeting. There does need to be proper notices set up under the bylaws and the corporation documents to make sure that it's done and it's followed correctly, which all the current organizations plan on doing. The deed would and would be required to include the same covenants to require that property be used for park and playground purposes. That runs with the land. That will be the same condition here. In fact, it'll almost be exactly the same terms, except for the grantor and the grantee related to the property meets and bounds and the covenant therein. Once that property is voted on to be transferred to Haverford, they can execute the deed as the grantor. It could be accepted by Haverford Township as the grantee. They'll record the deed, and it will be then Haverford Township's property. After that time, I would anticipate that the Playfield Association probably does not have any more purpose to be in existence. Will either unwind or perhaps just take no further action and let it sort of naturally fade away. There are requirements, again, to have those meetings scheduled with proper notice to the parties. I believe each party has 90 days from the purpose of a meeting designation to make an appointment. However, I believe the 3 organizations are ready and willing to make those appointments soon. And when those appointments are made, the meeting will get scheduled. Again, the concern, and I've heard from the neighbors, is, well, what if Lower Merion doesn't do what they're supposed to do? Again, we have that in the agreement, that they will take the steps to cooperate with this process. And it's expected to occur within a year, but the agreement says it must occur within a year. That would be the next step once all of the agreements are signed and ready to go.
Thank you, John. So the next thing we need to talk about as part of this whole agreement and part of allowing Lower Merion to use, to get school buses into the parking lot there. As you know, we've explored a number of options, many of which this neighbor group has felt objectionable, particularly that use of Railroad Avenue for dropping students off, or the use of that part of the park to create a pull-off for the buses. We understand that that was largely objectionable, so we looked at the driveway. And I've put on the screen a schematic of what a bus turnaround would look like. When you think about this driveway and the parking lot, keep in mind that we also explored the possibility of expanding the parking lot further into the grass area to the right on the screen in front of you. And that, again, we didn't want to lose that open space, that open park area. And so at this stage of the game, at this juncture, what we're looking at is creating the turnaround that you see in the front of the room. Dave, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to bring up the next slide, which is a rendering of what it looks like. So you could maybe describe what, this is Dave Pannoni, representing our township engineer, Pannoni. So.
Sure, Dave. It's and this drawing, this rendering is a little more, a little easier to read. So, but Dave's right. If a school bus is going to turn around, you can almost think of you need an area as large as a standard cul-de-sac to turn a school bus around without having to back up. That's why cul-de-sacs are sized the way they are, with a minimum 40-foot diameter radius. So we looked at extending the parking lot, putting a 40-foot diameter radius. We also realized at the end of the parking lot, which would be the end furthest from the entrance, if that area is vacated, if there are not vehicles parked there with a little bit of a modification, and you can see a little bump out on 3 sides, we can accommodate a 40-foot radius, a 40-foot turn. That does require the restrictions in the use of that end of the lot anytime a bus is going to go down there and turn. So we collaborated with the Recreation Department and the Police Department and to see if it's even feasible to restrict the use of that lot at certain times. It wouldn't be 24/7, 7 days a week. It would only be at the time school buses are anticipated. So that would be roughly 17 spots that would be blocked off at the time when the school buses are anticipated, and a bus would come in and be able to make a full turn without having to back up, just like if they went in a cul-de-sac and turned around.
We're going to do the questions at the end. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the rendering with the
Yep,
entrance.
so you back up one, Dave, if you don't mind. So everybody knows the entrance is roughly 14, 15, 16 feet wide. It sits within a right of way between the two properties. That entrance has been there for a long time. Talking to the emergency services, talking to school bus people, it's a little less than ideal to not have a school bus and an emergency vehicle be able to pass each other. It's probably less than ideal to SUVs can't pass each other. So what we would look at is widening the paved area to a minimum of 20 feet wide to allow for two-way traffic to come in and out, especially for safety purposes. And then modify the radiuses at the entrance. And they now, if you don't mind. And you can see roughly, like you can see, if to the left is a picture of the existing lot. In the end, we talked about where the turnaround would be. To the right is a photograph of the entrance. And just to try to establish some type of scale, we put, and it's far from an engineered drawing, but roughly a rendering of showing 2 feet of paving on either side of it. Takes us roughly to 20 feet. Again, that's really a bare minimum to allow vehicles to pass. Just to put things in perspective, you're in a parking lot outside, 20-foot wide aisles to allow cars to move around each other. But there's a lot more movement in a parking lot. Typical road, people are going 35, 30 miles an hour. You have 11, 12-foot lanes, 10 gets about as narrow as you can just to allow a bus and emergency vehicle to pass. So that's the basis of the two modifications we showed. Thanks, Dave.
Say something before you end.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Dave, for that presentation. One of the things that sticks out to me when I look at the presentation and everything that we've learned over the last almost 2 years is the majority of people, when they responded to the survey, were okay and said yes to the proposal. The key piece of that was if we get the details right. So that's what we've been doing over the last year, is working to get those details right. So like Dave laid out, it's making sure the fields are maintained, making sure we maintain the right usage that's responsible and that doesn't overcrowd the fields. It's making sure that we have rules and regulations that meet the right needs, but also that we enforce. It means looking at parking in the right way. Like was mentioned, we backed away from the bus pull-off on Railroad Avenue because we realized it was going to take down too many trees. It was going to be too disruptive to the neighborhood. So we also are making sure that it will always remain a park and a playground. These things are important because we want to be accountable to you for this park. We want Haverford Township to not only own the park, but also to be accountable to Haverford Township and its residents for maintaining the park and improving it. So that is our goal here. What we're here to do tonight is for you to tell us whether we've done that. Are these details right? Are they going to get us where we want to go? And so what we're going to do now is take your questions, take your comments. I think folks are going to come up to the podium and speak with us, and we'll do our best to answer questions, but we will also be listening. We're recording this. We'll make sure we get all the comments, and then that those are included in the agreement wherever possible. And if they're already in there, we can kind of dig through the agreement as it stands and talk through the language that's there now.
This concludes our portion of the presentation. It's my expectation that we'll take the comments that we received tonight, the other written comments that were received in response to the agreement that was circulated. We'll do our best to incorporate what we can with Lower Merion, and we'll recirculate the agreement through Commissioner Cavender in the next probably 2 weeks. So for now, can I just get a show of hands? How many folks are going to speak this evening? We have about 10 or 15, and we have about, a good hour left. So why don't we take like maybe 5 minutes each for your comments? And we'll just start in the front row right here.
My name is Jim Barrett. I live on.
You'll need to come to the microphone, sir.
Good evening. My name is Jim Barrett. I live on the corner of Rugby Road and Railroad Avenue. And I had a chance to spend an afternoon with Laura, and we went over the issues of myself and some of our neighbors. And at the present, we get a fair amount of bus traffic during the school year. And then with the additional of the ambulances going back and forth from the nursing home. So there's a significant amount of traffic on Railroad Avenue. My concern, and I think I've been reassured here, that the traditional entrance off of County Line Road will be the entrance for the buses for this field. So that's been firmly established, and I know that was my concern and concern of my neighbors. So I can leave this meeting saying that, feeling that's in concrete, and that'll be the entrance and exit for the buses and the traffic on that field. Because historically, that's been the only way to get on that field. That was my question, and the answer is yes then.
Yes. There's some language in there about the buses parking in Lower Merion Township. That was always the plan if we were going to do a drop-off. The idea, if we use the parking lot, is that buses are allowed to park in that area that we showed at the end where the turnaround is without idling. That's against state law. So yeah, Railroad Avenue is off the table.
Thank you.
Second row on this side. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Hi, Diane Durant-Law. I live on Rugby Road as well, so just a block off Polo Field. So when the initial discussion began, real concerns did involve the parking, the loading, unloading. That's huge. So very happy that that's been addressed, as well as the ownership of the field. I think having the ownership go to Haverford Township is a big step forward. I think equally important in terms of that step, however, is that there should be, in my opinion, a fixed term for this agreement, as opposed to a 10-year renewable agreement that is instituted here. I think with transfer of the ownership to Haverford Township, it's especially important that in the future, Haverford Township has perhaps a greater role in determining what the future needs and use are going to be. And I think having a fixed term, I would urge no more than 5 years, honestly, under which at the end of that term, it's known by the parties that this agreement is going to terminate and that it must be renegotiated. Not renewed, renegotiated, because there could very well be new terms and conditions that are important to our township, especially with ownership being now in Haverford Township's bailiwick. I think there's, we could go into more details about this, but I think that it's just a real benefit to be able to renegotiate terms, and that in the future, there may be different needs. The township may have programs, groups, organizations that want to use this. And once the field, we know it's wholly within the confines of the township now, but with ownership comes greater need to have that kind of control. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm just going to work my way back on this side. Is there anybody second or third Moreau. Then, sir, you had your hand up.
My name is Jacques Cachidal. I live on County Line Road. And it's my understanding that this meeting tonight is more in the spirit of exploring and listening to people. Therefore, we ought not be promising things like, definitely, the entry on County Line is the way it's going to be. I have a number of concerns about that particular entrance, as do 8 of my neighbors who all live along County Line Road. The first concern you've met, at least Pannoni has attempted to meet, with the circle at the end of the loop. That will allow a large bus to turn around without having the driver do a 3-point turn. That's very important in a crowded area. But the thing it mustn't do is replicate problems that are already great. I don't see how, if 2 buses are parked in that circle and there are cars coming in, how those buses are ever going to get out, particularly in that critical 5:30 period. Right, that's the critical period where one group of kids is leaving and another group is coming in on their buses. That space in between, particularly if there are cars there, doesn't allow 2 buses to go by each other. It just doesn't, right? So we have a lot of opposition to that, not to mention what has been our principal issue throughout this whole thing, and when I say we, I say many of us on County Line, which is usage. Everything else you've done, and I congratulate you on it, there's been a lot of work on this. But the usage issue is what it's all about, and I know there are people here who are going to talk about that. We're being misled a little bit in terms of how busy this field is going to be. And in order to see that, we took a look at the schedules for next year. Do that. You draw your own conclusions. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy.
Actually, my name is Kathy Case. I live on County Line Road also, and I have copies of the schedule for next year. This is what, Dave, you were working on too, so we're duplicating it. Here's the big problem with this bus turnaround and everything. You're taking away 17 parking places. That parking lot is always full. Where are they going to go? Who's going to police it? Who's going to tell them you can't park here? Every day after school, there needs to be somebody there at the end of the road saying, making sure the buses can get in, because they'll be coming from 2 directions, more buses than we've ever had coming to that field. And who's going to police that? Is Lower Merion going to pay for that? Are we going to have to pay for that? I mean, somebody has to be there. It can't be Joe DeRazio and me anymore. And so they don't. What you don't understand is that bringing the buses there at a time when the Lower Merion Little League is leaving, 3 o'clock's not a problem. At between 5 and 6, the Lower Merion Little League is arriving. Two soccer clubs are arriving with massive amount of people, all in cars, and the Black Rock buses and their opponents are going to be trying to get out of that parking lot with all these cars arriving. It's a disaster. It's because of overusage. Now, the best thing to do would be just give Black Rock the field exclusively 5 days a week, and then you wouldn't have this problem. These people all arrive in cars. I came to the Board of Commissioners not too long ago showing pictures of the traffic jams. It happens not every day, but you can't even predict when it's going to happen. So if you want to see what it's going to look like, how many people are going to be on the field, the red is us, and these are, you forget about the soccer people. It's not the baseball people that are causing our problem. And you said it yourself, Brian, when we met at the field. It's the soccer people who are causing the problem. They come with hundreds, and they all come in cars. So I would like to say this agreement's got to include Lower Merion providing a guard, a traffic director, or something like that, who will stand out there every day, 5 days a week, between the hours of 3 and, say, 6 o'clock, directing traffic, saying you can't park. It takes 1 car illegally parked in that lot to stop the buses. And they park illegally in the fire lanes. You know that, Chief, and you can't even tell them not to park there. They tell you to go buzz off. So, and I'm not going to get in fights with people. So what are we going to do? The problem, it's all nice to say, I can see all the trees on Railroad Avenue from my house, so I didn't want them cut down either. But now it's County Line Road's problem. I see some of my Lower Merion neighbors here from County Line, They're worried about it too. The buses will be traffic stops in front of our driveways. So it's easy to say, oh, use the parking lot, that's what we've always used, but not with this kind of traffic, not with this kind of usage. People will be killed, their fights break out now. It's too much permitting. Every square inch, every hour of the day in the spring is permitted. So that's easy to control. Have some empty fields. Imagine that. I mean, I understand the competition for athletic fields, but it's crazy when it causes this traffic. That road was built as a carriage road in 1890, and it's not wide enough. No matter how wide you make it, when the lot's full, it doesn't make any difference how wide the road is. So the question I really wanted to ask, and if anybody wants a copy of these, please help yourselves, is about the ownership transfer. I understand a lot about the Playfield Association because I wrote the history of the field, and I was very surprised to see in this draft the exact plan that Andy Lewis had for transferring the ownership of the field. He talked to several people about being on this board. He said this can be done because the majority of the members of the board were all from Haverford Township. 4 out of 5 of them were from Haverford Township, from the only members they had of the board. And the vote there, by their bylaws, which I think I've memorized by now, is simple majority vote. So Lower Merion's one representative on that board could object all he or she wanted and would be outvoted. So what is the difference? I mean, what are we gaining that we couldn't have done any time in the last 40 years? But nobody really needed to do it, particularly. There weren't all these problems that we have today. But so I'm asking, our council, could this have been done at any time, this transfer?
Could all of any entity could have said, we are going to make a nomination to our board, make that nomination for the board. That person could have called a meeting. They could have then called a meeting of the Bryn Mawr Playfield Association, given the proper notices. And if the other entities did not make appointments to that board, the person that was there could have made their own appointments.
So it could have been done anytime. I mean, today, or these things are not relevant. It could have been done any time in the past since 1944.
Correct.
Well, actually, the last member of that board died in 1987.
Well,
Yeah, but
So the
things
thing,
were changed in between. I mean, you at some point in time, you did have the Bryn Mawr Horse Association. It's no longer there, so that
it
wasn't.
hasn't been around since the 40s. Yeah.
But so since the 40s, and that.
Yeah. But it does allow in that agreement for if those two entities, as in H. Lloyd, who's dead, and the Bryn Mawr Horse Association, which is defunct, then the rest of the board members can nominate someone else.
Correct.
2 of those board members are from Haverford Township and one's from Lower Merion.
One's from the school district, one's from the township.
Right.
Correct.
So that's a majority on that board, no matter how you look at it.
Of the 3.
So if Lower
Kathy,
Merion
you're
said,
right.
no, we can't sell this, and the board does have the right to sell the property, it's in the bylaws. If they say, no, you can't do that, they'd be outvoted, wouldn't they, by the Haverford
they
Township?
would. And Kathy, you're exactly right. It could have been done. It would have likely cost us a lot of money in legal fees. That's taxpayer dollars. It could have been a prolonged fight. Lower Merion was not going to give up that field without a fight. I mean, there's just no way it would have happened the way it could or should have happened. You are right. But the reality is we had to wait for this time to take the opportunity and make it happen.
So let me ask you this. So the Lower Merion board member objects on no grounds whatsoever, because the board has the right to sell the thing. The intent of the owner, the original owner of that, H. Lloyd, was very clear throughout history. He wanted Haverford Township to have it. Sounds like the Barnes Foundation a little bit, but
And that was actually my
yeah.
comparison that I draw when I'm explaining what
Right.
could happen
Yeah.
and how long and drawn out.
He desperately tried to give it to Haverford Township, and he didn't, and they wouldn't take it back in the 40s. We have records of that. We have his intent. We have everything. What Andy was planning to do was reconstitute the full board, because there is somewhere in their charter saying that they need to have 5 members for a full board. And the others would obviously still be the majority would be from Haverford Township. So there would be a full board. They would take, this is before Black Rock Middle School was even built. So, this was his plan to get ownership with Haverford Township. And I don't know whether Lower Merion would have objected or not. to be
I can
honest.
tell you, I think they would have.
On what legal grounds, though? What is this going to cost the community in terms? I mean, it's fine. There are only 8 of us on County Line. Our lives will be a nightmare for about only maybe 2 or 3 months. And then, we'll maybe find some place to go on vacation or something during those and hope that nobody gets killed in this melee. Because I see it all the time. Nobody's out there at night from the township unless we call them. So and are we supposed to just call the police every time something happens? The people there don't care where they park. They don't care if they get a ticket. They're parking their Porsche there. They don't care. And so it's very hard to enforce. And you've seen the thing, Chief, I know. Is it your job to have to do that because Black Rock Middle School is causing the problem? I wouldn't think so.
Thank you, Kathy.
Anybody else on that side of the room who'd like to, oh, there. Hi, Tom. Good to see you.
Hello, Tom East on Millbrook, 5th Ward. I've been following this closely, particularly with respect to the parking of the buses, and I have just a couple of questions. If there's a 36-foot wide, call it a driveway or an entryway, why couldn't the full amount of it be used, or practically all of it used, to make 2 complete lanes with bike lanes or sidewalks on either side, so that people could come into the park and pass, easily? I keep hearing it's narrow. It doesn't have to be narrow because it's 36. The right-of-way is 36 feet. So that would allow for 2 full-size lanes plus 2 5-foot bike lanes, which I believe 5 feet is the amount for that. And the other thing, I guess maybe I've been enlightened here, I was not aware that there was so much use. In the early days of these meetings, people, I think from Laura Marion, mentioned that not too many people drove there, that there weren't a lot of cars other than the buses. So I'm here, I don't have any history of how congested the parking lot is, but I was wondering why. My theory was that the buses would arrive and there would be some sort of a marked entryway for the buses. They could drive stay to the right, maybe leaving 3 feet so that when the students step off the bus, they don't step in the grass but on the pavement. And then it would make the arch to turn. I've driven a 40-foot motor coach myself for a long time, and I know that you don't necessarily need 40 feet to turn a school bus because it only has a 20-foot wheelbase, and the wheels, the front axle is on the front, up near the front of the vehicle. So if you allowed, my question is this, could you allow the buses to remain on the parking lot in this lane that would be constructed during the course of the complete practice or during games, rather than leaving and going somewhere and then having to return and all that traffic and so forth? And my thinking was that in the event that you had some sort of a sudden thunderstorm with lightning, at least you'd have some place that the students could have a little safety by getting in the buses that remained there. So I guess I'd like to have a better understanding of the number of buses that would come. Are the softball teams from the same school, and the hardball teams are from the same school and the opposing school? And was it require 2 buses or 4 buses? Does anyone know?
So, Brian, can you address the usage during that time?
Yes. Middle school games typically don't bring a big crowd. So even during game times, and I'm not sure if Lower Merion plans to use 1 or 2 buses to transport a softball team and a baseball team. There's probably somewhere about 15, 16 players on each team. So theoretically, they could use 1 bus. I don't know how they plan to do that. But typically during the number of parents that can show up after school is limited. Games that happen at 6 o'clock definitely being a larger crowd, and most of the traffic issues in the parking lot occur during the crossover times, like was previously mentioned, where the afternoon people are leaving and the evening people are arriving. So one of the things that we tried to do this past year was to try to get Lower Merion and Haverford Township's evening groups to stagger their start times so that there's not everybody arriving at the same time and everybody leaving at the same time. But there are definitely some pinch points that the neighbors have definitely told us about.
So would you say that if the buses had their own lane of paint on the pavement to park in, that they could remain on the property, either 2 or 4 buses, and still leave enough room for cars?
Well, I think that the plan right now calls for the buses to come in all the way to the end of the parking lot, unload their students, and then remain at the end of the parking lot until they're ready to leave. And at that point, they would drive out so they wouldn't have to turn around.
That's not clear in the agreement. That would have to be, the agreement would have to be rewritten to accomplish that, because it says that the buses will discharge their passengers and go somewhere in Lower Merion.
So that's part of providing a draft, is that it isn't quite done. So that was the previous plan. As we're working out the details of the parking lot, those will be included in the final plan. So like we said at the beginning, this is a draft. The plan is to use the parking lot. The plan had been before that buses have to leave and park in Lower Merion, and that language is still in there.
So it's being considered now that the buses would remain on the
Correct.
parking lot?
Correct, the way Brian described
And I would
it.
ask the engineer if there were a lane.
There should be language that will remain in the agreement that would say but for any, whether it's this agreement or a separate agreement related to bus parking, that those buses are not going to be parking in Haverford Township. I mean, that's a safety net for everybody. We don't want buses trying to find places, around the Haverford neighborhood.
No, I'm clear about that. I believe
that needs to be in here, and that is in here. But you're right, we need to make it clear that except for parking in this parking lot.
Right, with the
Parking anywhere else
motors
in Haverford
off.
Township.
Yeah, with the engines not running, because state law says any vehicle more than 5 tons, I think, has to turn its engine off when it's idling. So I guess the question I have is, if the buses are allowed to stay on there and they're in some sort of a lane, and let's say one bus gets filled quickly and wants to depart, I would ask the engineer if the bus could then swing, if they're not jammed together, but with some space, if the bus could swing out and make the turn and leave before the lead bus leaves.
What we'd have to look at is how many buses could stack, and it would be very unlikely that a bus that's not in the lead could jump out of that stack and pass the buses with that type of configuration. It's just too tight a radius. So you'd have to have the lead bus leave first.
So you couldn't have parallel buses, side-by-side buses, and
With
still
a
make the
40-foot
turn?
radius, I don't know how you can do it safely and reasonably.
Okay.
They have a turning radius that you just can't change. So we could come up with an empirical number on how many could stack, but I don't think you can take them out of turn.
Okay. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Tom.
Anybody else on the left-hand side? Terrific. Oh, Mr. Shannon.
Good evening. I thank you all for having this meeting and for all the efforts that have gone into it. I'm a David Shannon at Rugby Road. I'm a big fan of the polo field. I'm also a big fan of softball and hardball, including our Haverford Township Little League. I've always been a walker of the polo field, and for years, more than 30, cross the polo field first thing in the morning to get to the train, and then sadly late at night to get home from work. But it's a wonderful field. I love the field and want to see it preserved. My comments on the agreement are not opposed to the agreement, but more in the spirit of getting the details right, as Dave Berman pointed out. So, a few points. Transfer of ownership. I think the obligation on Lower Merion Township should be clearer. It should spell out that they don't just won't oppose it, they should have to actively support it, whether that includes signing any documents or appearing at any hearing or proceeding that's required. They should be obligated to do that, and it would be a material breach if they don't. I'm not clear as to the legal requirements and whether they would require being a charitable organization, whether the transfer of the property of that organization has to be approved by at least by the Orphans Court. In addition to Lower Merion going along, others might. We wanted Lower Merion's cooperation, of course, but others could object, and then that might require hearings and et cetera. So I think the agreement should be clear on that. Second, what happens, it's got a 1-year period that if the transfer does not occur within a year, it has to occur within a year. And there's no provision that I saw that says what happens if it doesn't occur within a year. Does that mean we don't get title? Does it mean we do get title or nothing happens? That needs to be spelled out. Once transfer is accomplished, I think the provisions for control need to be clearer. The way the agreement is written, I appreciate that for close to 80 years, everything gets worked out when there's disagreements, and that's the way it should work. If that continues, there's not really a great need for an agreement or worrying about the details. The problem is agreements are necessary when there's a disagreement or the marriage starts to split up. And I think those provisions need to be stronger, particularly once ownership is transferred. It has to be very clear that Haverford Township has ultimate control. I think specifically that means, for example, it was said there's an assurance that there'll be no increased intensity of use. That seems to me the heart of the concerns of the neighbors. I don't think the agreement clearly spells out, I haven't seen it, that there will be no increased intensity of use and what that means. It seems to me it would need a statement of what is the current intensity of use and how that won't be increased, and that increases would be a breach, and any change of use would need to be, including the schedules that come up, would need to be not just agreed to by Haverford Township, but subject to Haverford Township's review and approval. So, for example, on the scheduling, periodically, whether it's quarterly or whatever's practical, but 6 months, a year, at some point, there should be a statement of the intended use by Lower Merion, our tenant at that point, and our tenant should tell us what they want to do with the property, and we should have the right to review and approve that. You can put in phrases like the approval shall not be unreasonably withheld, or in some instances, it should be solely in Haverford Township's control and discretion. So that's throughout the agreement. I won't speak to the particular points, but throughout the agreement, this is a nice agreement we've always gotten along and we'll keep getting along and we'll agree about everything. I want to make it real clear what happens when we don't agree, and to avoid disputes and legal fees for our township that we are reluctant to incur for obvious reasons. It should be clear, there should be some provision for dispute resolution, even on the small stuff, even on the scheduling issue or a maintenance issue, a usage issue, particularly increased intensity of use, And it could be simple. It doesn't have to be elaborate arbitration proceedings, but there needs to be some way to resolve disputes. I concur in the comments on termination. Termination is really a misnomer. It's an option to renew on the part of Lower Merion after 10 years. And I think renegotiation in good faith is a better provision. In good faith, it's a real obligation on the part of Haverford. Doesn't leave Lower Merion at risk. A couple of specifics. I personally don't like dawn to dusk. I think that's much too much leeway. Dawn is early. Sunday, 6 a.m. I think it should be no earlier than 9 a.m. 10 a.m. is even better. And very clear on the provisions on capital improvements. I just think that needs to be stronger. That, again, no capital improvements without approval. It talks about agreement now. It should be no capital improvements. I don't think there should be any capital improvements in the agreement. But if there are any, they need to be reviewed and approved by Haverford Township. And on capital improvements, since we own it, I would say that's solely in Haverford Township's discretion. Last, I would spell out more clearly the no increased noise pollution, light pollution, no amplification. I think there is something in there now about lights, but that be clear that there shall be none in perpetuity. Thank you.
Thanks, David. David, you're also going to submit some comments in writing? Okay, thanks.
Doreen Saar, Rugby Road. I want to thank you all for what you've done with this. And as I think everyone has said, it is the details that we're working on, and the details are difficult. I would like to say, and I thank Laura for putting this through. I think she's done a wonderful job with this, with lots of support from other members of the township. I would like to second what David said about this, and putting in place procedures for resolution before the agreement now contemplates going to court. I think there might be a whole section of agreements, and again, think of this as a marriage. You do want to avoid divorce court. You'd like to at least let people go to counseling before they go to divorce court, and perhaps put in some procedures that mirror that. In that spirit, I think one issue that's been ignored here is neighbor representation. So right now, we have been putting all of the decision-making into Parks and Rec, but where is the place for the neighbors who have been so involved in this to have some way into that process? And I think that an availability of being in that process would simplify what's going on now and would guarantee the kind of neighborhood involvement that you really, really want in this kind of situation. And I do think that Haverford Township's position in this agreement is not strong enough. If you become the landlord, and I happen to be part owner of something where we are trying to evict a tenant, and I think when you look at this in terms of a landlord-tenant agreement, rather than just a just getting along agreement, that certain of the positions taken could be changed. Because in essence, you are the landlord of the place, and Lower Merion has become the tenant. And I'll put on my English teacher hat just briefly, but there are some places where there is slippage. So, for example, the parties agree that at this time, no improvements are contemplated for field lighting or permanent fixtures. And I know the neighbors are opposed to lighting and permanent fixtures. So I would take out at this time, and I would make some of these stipulations that the neighbors feel strongly about, make it clear that those will continue. And again, I think when we're owners, the really mutual agreement. And another point, and the last page, in turn, upon becoming the legal property owner of the Polo Field, Haverford Township agrees that the terms and rights of this agreement shall remain effective and unchanged, seems to me to be open to some dispute. I think that language, from my perspective, is unclear and could lead, if you're in an adversarial position, to a problem. So I would kind of look at some of those points, and I will put this in writing with details because I love to write things. All right, thanks very much.
Thanks, Dory.
Can I address the dispute resolution? From Haverford's point of view, and I think it is Haverford, if we are the landlord, I would like to put Haverford in a situation that if there is a problem and the neighbors are experiencing a problem, I don't want to wait for months to talk it out with Lower Merion. If it has reached this point already, we're not going to come to a resolution. I would like to stop the problem for the neighbors. To me, the easiest, quickest, fastest, and cheapest way of doing that is to just go to court, tell the court what's happening. I'm sure we'll have photographs or evidence, and there will be people supporting that, and get it to stop. So in my mind, this agreement is set up in a way to address any problems that might affect the neighbors and to try to stop those problems as quickly as we can. And that is why the language is not set up to try to go to mediate an issue while presumably that problem would continue to occur. And that problem would be with a permittee, not the actual township itself. It's directed in a way to try to take swift injunctive relief, declaratory action to address that issue. And that's how it's intentionally set up that way.
Thank you for waiting patiently on the right. Please come forward.
Hello, my name is Kim Landry. I live on Polo Road, one house in from the Polo Field. Like many here tonight, I love the field. I use it very often. I walk my dog there almost daily. And it is obvious to me that times of day and times of the year make a huge difference in how used the Polo Field appears to be and how much traffic and parking is already there. I haven't heard anyone talk about any traffic studies or parking studies that have been done. Everything that you're hearing is hearsay, essentially, from me and from everyone else who observes this, because we don't really have any documentation. So we don't really know how many cars are going to be parked there at these peak times in the spring when people are coming and going from different games. With that understood, that we're not going to be able to do those kinds of studies, we're not going to have hard evidence, I think we have to err on the side of having plenty of parking, plenty of space for buses, plenty of road width for people to go in opposite directions on the entry road. And we need to have, as someone mentioned earlier, people, traffic control people there during these peak times. I don't see any other way that you're going to prevent terrible traffic problems on County Line Road during those 3 peak months. I was thrilled when the bus parking off of Railroad Avenue was resolved. I felt in my favor because I live closest to that end of the field, but I also have a good friend who lives on County Line Road sitting next to me, and I understand her plight and the plight of all the people who live on County Line Road, that even though it says on paper that the intensity of use is not going to increase, we assume middle school parents are not going to come after school to watch their kids play. We don't really know. I mean, that's just, we assume, because Middle schools don't usually draw huge crowds. But I think there are steps that you could take to mitigate the impact on County Line Road. I've talked about a couple of them, increasing the amount of parking. That area at the end where you're talking about having the bus do its loop to turn around, that far end of the polo field there is never used by anyone for anything. There's plenty of room there to expand the parking lot, or to just, instead of taking away 17 spaces, leave the number of spaces that are already there and create the bus turnaround in that unused area. It could certainly be done. And you've got money being thrown at this by Lower Merion. You can use that money to hire people to direct traffic. We're not talking about a whole lot of time. People who can be there for a few hours at these peak times in April, May, and June. So thank you very much. And thank you to Laura for making this happen. I think it's going to be a great thing for Haverford Township.
Thanks, Kim.
Hi, my name is Cassie Solomon, and I'm a resident on County Line Road. So I'd sort of like to speak for just a moment for County Line Road residents. Half of us belong to you, half of us belong to Lower Merion. So we're kind of an easy group to ignore. We're a little bit orphaned in this process. The thing that concerns me the most, I love Polo Field and we use it every day too, but I'm really content with all the work that you've done on that. But the traffic issues on County Line Road are bad, and they have gotten worse. And I just want to say something out of the ordinary to illustrate a point. If I said, hey, you guys have the best ever idea. We're going to have the buses drop the kids off on the corner at Old Lancaster and County Line, and then they can just walk down that little, not even quarter of a mile to get to the polo field. And then the buses won't have to turn around. They'll just keep going straight. We know how crazy that proposal would be. We know how adamant the parents would be that they would not allow their children to get to the polo field that way. They would not allow them to walk back in the dark. But that's what the residents of County Line Road are doing every single day. So my friends on Railroad Avenue have their sidewalk. We don't. We are a really dangerous street, and we're about to be more dangerous. And when I'll throw Scott under the bus, proverbially, because he's not here, I don't think. When he says that's a state road, I say, well, if you guys can't advocate for us with the state, I think that should absolutely be part of this package. And I think the fact that it's a state road is not an excuse to not do the right thing, because it's just getting more dangerous. Thanks.
Thank you, Cassie.
Working our way back.
Hi, my name is Wendy McGarvey, and I've been a resident of Old Lancaster Road for 27 years. I'm the proud wife of Franny McGarvey, who's been a resident of right on the polo field for 70 plus years. So we are acquainted with the polo field and love it dearly. I want to reiterate most of what other people have said. I do have one unladylike thing to ask you though. When are we getting paid this $275,000 and the $190,000? No? Nobody knows?
After the agreement is
It's not-
packed and before the fields are used.
Okay, all right. Then I'll go back to my prepared questions. We think that the polo field should be first and foremost a neighborhood park, and we just want that clearly kept in mind as you go through making the agreement. And we thought towards that end, there should be an annual review of the maintenance arrangements, not as stated from time to time. A lot of my comments may seem nitpicky, but you want to nail down what the terms are so nobody has any questions later on about what was meant. And the capital improvements in section 3, I think Dave brought this up, about Lower Merion permittees have a big say in capital improvements. No, they shouldn't. No, they should not have any say in it. They can request them, but they shouldn't have that much influence. Also, that no lights, not at this time, no lights, period. I mean, the field is such and the neighborhood is such as those bloody lights would shine right in everybody's house. And then the permitting, the terms dawn to dusk, they have different meanings to different people. I mean, to me, dawn may be 5 in the morning. So can we nail down times, like from when to when instead of dawn to dusk? Anyway. And then I'd really like to see a schematic showing the location and designations of the fields. You know, to the uninitiated, like me, when you say field 1, field 2, I'm not sure what you're talking about. So if we have a nice schematic of that, I'd really appreciate it. And then section 5 permitting, that we need to nail down the months, the days of the week, and the times when BlackRock is going to be using the field. It needs to be specified clearly. And the pickup and drop off and parking arrangements, I think that's already been addressed. I didn't understand, and maybe I still don't, are the buses going to be sitting there at the end of the parking lot? Is that the current plan?
That is the idea, that they can, because it will reduce the number of times they come in and out. The stipulation would be that they can't idle.
They will not be allowed to idle.
Will not be, they
Those
can't
fumes are going to come right up our way, so.
That's actually state regulation as well, so everyone's aware that that's a requirement.
Okay. And also, we think that the contract should be limited to 1 term. Should not be 10 years and then they get another 10 years, because then it becomes like, well, this is the way it's always been. And that's not the idea. And when the ownership is transferred to Haverford, we need to specify, exactly how that's going to happen, when it's going to happen, what are the consequences of not fulfilling any of those terms. And then the lessor should have the ultimate say in what goes on, in permitting and improvements and maintenance. And right now, the lessor is the not yet reconstituted Bryn Mawr Playfield Association, but it will be Haverford Township. When ownership is transferred, we should have the ultimate say on that. I think at that time also, this whole agreement needs to be reworked, because why would we, if it belongs to us, then we should be the ones making the terms. Lower Merion should not. They can be a permittee, but surely they can't be in the same position they are now. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Thank you so much for holding this meeting tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Wendy.
Clarify whether the buses are going to be parking there? I thought the agreement says they will be parking off-site. They will be parking in Lower Merion, all buses.
The idea is
Yeah,
go ahead.
there will be no parking in Haverford Township unless they're parking in the parking lot.
The agreement said no buses will park in Haverford.
It says,
Previous version of the.
permittees of the visit team says are prohibited from parking buses in Haverford Township except under the agreed upon. And I'm going to change it to say, it says right now, use of the Polo Field parking lot, but I'm going to clarify it to say except under the agreed upon permitted parking or some language within the Polo Field parking lot. So it does reference that you can't park in Haverford unless it's within the Polo Field parking lot. And the intent is to prohibit buses from parking elsewhere in the community. but it does not, wouldn't preclude parking in the Polo Field parking lot.
It referred to accept the agreed upon agreement for parking in Polo Field parking lot, but there wasn't any agreement there. So is it just Lower Merion School District buses can park there? Their opponents have to park somewhere else? That was in the draft that I saw.
So I think when we addressed this, you were out of the room, but since it's a draft agreement, that language still needs to be added. But the idea is that they can use the parking lot, Lower Merion. This is only discussing Lower Merion and Black Rock Middle School. We're enabling them to use the parking lot during those times to drop children off. They can't idle, and they can't park anywhere else in Haverford Township.
They can park in the parking lot.
Correct.
Or the opposing school.
Yes, that's right.
So there'll be up to 4 buses parked there in all the soccer players? There are games that, they have 2 at the same time, and they bring Central School.
And that's why it's left the way that it was drafted, because then they would not be able to park there. But they're not going to park in Haverford Township. We want Lower Merion to find a place in Lower Merion for them to park. That's, quite frankly, Lower Marion's problem, not Haverford's problem.
Read that as a kind of victory that we thought the buses would be parking. Not allowed to idle by state law.
Correct.
Anyway, but that doesn't mean bus drivers don't turn on their engines, however.
Kathy, we're recording this meeting, and whoever's watching it is not going to be able to hear you from your seat. And I also, we need to get through with the others, and then we can come back to you. So, Mr. Swan, were you next?
Good evening. Thank you all for finding the time to be here, and we appreciate the time and energy that has gone into this draft agreement. It's clear that Commissioner Cavender has made an effort to incorporate input from the community. When compared to the previous agreements which have governed the 2 townships' cooperation around the Polo Field, this draft is certainly a step in the right direction. From my point of view, it feels like too much is being asked of this single agreement. It feels like you're trying to accomplish a lot. First of all, you're trying to spell out the terms of cooperation for the period when the townships are co-lessees of the property. Second, you're trying to address the transfer of ownership, spell out the process and the obligations and the time frame. Third, you're trying to outline the rights and obligations of the 2 townships when Haverford Township will own the field and be leasing it or permitting Lower Merion to use it. And then you're putting in all of these other things, such as the Lower Merion Township's intent to issue a multi-year permit to BlackRock, the $275,000 and the $190,000. So it's too much for one agreement to do. It seems like it should be broken up into at least a couple, where one governs everything up to the moment when Haverford Township gets ownership, and afterwards you have a very simple agreement. It's essentially, we own the field and we're letting you guys use it. You need to do some maintenance or pay, I assume. So it just seems like the agreement becomes very unwieldy. The terms are unclear. There are all sorts of there's all sorts of language in there which has been in the past about, we'll come to agreement about permitting, usage, maintenance, which is just inappropriate if we own the field. So I would suggest just taking a second look at that to simplify it into 2 agreements at least. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake.
Mr. DeRazio.
My name's Joe DeRazio. I live at 111 County Line Road. My property abuts the access drive. And I just want to start by answering a gentleman's question back there that you neglected to answer. He asked why we couldn't just put 2 lanes. It's a 36-foot right-of-way. Why we can't put 2 lanes there? It's a 36-foot private right-of-way, and I own half of it. That's why, okay? It's not a public right-of-way, and I don't think a lot of people know this, all right? I own half of that right-of-way, and my neighbor owns the other half. So, and that's in our deed, that we are allowed to use it, both myself and my neighbor, and the Bryn Mawr Playfield Association. That's why we can't put a two-lane road, it would require my approval and my neighbor's approval. And unfortunately, the 2 feet that you need on my side, I can't give you. I can't do it. If you can get it from my neighbor to get you the 4 feet, that's great. The second thing I want to talk about is this bus turnaround. I can guarantee you, the first day buses pull up there, I don't care what signs you guys put there, there's going to be a car parked right there. Okay? That blows your whole deal. All right? That car is going to be parked there. Now the buses are scrambling. They're backing up, they're pulling out, they're pulling. The only way that works is if you get rid of the parking spaces, delineate the circle, no parking, ever, okay? And now you're talking about parking buses on the parking lot, which again, where are they going to park? Wherever you're saying they're going to park, there's going to be a car there. So now we need bus parking only, okay? Now, that'll work, okay? I think that'll work. Unfortunately, Mr. Barrett's going to have a fit because what's going to happen is that eliminates a lot of parking spaces, okay? Which during Haverford Soccer Club and Lower Merion Soccer Club is going to be a problem, and you won't be able to permit as many fields there by eliminating all those parking spaces. Somebody asked about just increasing the parking lot, okay, making it bigger, all right? Taking away green space. That requires stormwater management, which is another problem there. That parking lot has no stormwater management. Am I correct, Mr. Pinoni? I'm sure it predates the ordinances, correct. But if we, let me ask you this, if we modify a parking lot like that, do our codes require us to capture the runoff from that?
Commissioner, you want me to answer that? Yeah. So anytime improvements are made in Haverford Township, like when Mr. Durazio improved his own property, we have an ordinance that requires stormwater management. The ordinance is first ordinance was established in, I believe, the 1970s. It was updated about 15 years ago based on some state requirements. So anytime additional impervious cover is added over a certain amount of square footage, there are stormwater management requirements right in the ordinance. Whether Mr. Durazio does it, I do it at my house. There's ordinances that address stormwater management. So yeah, you're correct.
So the entire parking lot would have to be captured?
No.
Not the entire
Yeah,
parking?
you don't go back and this stormwater ordinance is 50 pages long. Unless you're reconstructing or rebuilding or replacing the lot, you don't have to address stormwater for the entire lot. Similar to, say, I put a 2,000-foot addition on my house. That addition is what requires the additional stormwater management.
Okay, so I'll have to alert my engineers about that because I know I've had to do that in the past. So I'll make sure that we don't have to do that next time.
So, but Dave, when we talked about this, you did include stormwater management in the plan.
What we did is with the no additional impervious surface, should there be none in the parking lot, we didn't make accommodations for any stormwater management in the estimate. When we looked at some of the other options that added impervious cover, we put stormwater management into the estimate.
And that would include the driveway.
Both the driveway, and even when we were looking at Railroad Avenue, I know we discounted that option, but we had that in the estimate.
Okay. So that leads me to my final question, and I don't quite understand this whole process. Am I right in saying that you're billing Mr. Solicitor and Mr. Pinoni are billing Haverford Township for your time tonight, correct?
You asking me that question?
Yeah, you're billing us?
Yes.
Okay. Just so that everybody knows, we're paying Mr. Pinoni and our solicitor to be here tonight with our tax dollars, for something Lower Merion School District wants. Okay? Just so everybody knows that. Now, the proper procedure, Lower Merion School District wants to develop this property. The proper procedure is for Lower Merion School District to have their engineers spend their money to draw a plan. Why are we drawing plans for Lower Merion School District? I don't understand. They should be drawing the plans, and the plans should be complete, because the township won't accept anything except completed plans to put in for permits. Complete meaning, how many parking spaces do we need for these fields? Do we know? Does anybody know how many parking spaces are required? I know, but that's what should be on the plan. The plans should be 100% complete. They should show the fields, like Mrs. McGarvey's asking, show exactly what fields they'll be using, exactly how much seating in the fields, because the parking in our zoning ordinance is based on how many seats are there, okay? Their engineers should be drawing this plan. It should be presented for permits to the township, at which point the township would require escrow. See, I know this because I've done this before, and this is what they require of me.
Sir, but you went through a land development on your property. Okay.
So
There are no improvements being proposed except
we're
for
improving
perhaps
a parking lot.
with some painting and
We're
restriping.
changing the parking lot.
Perhaps, well, painting and restriping is not a land development.
So,
Okay,
so regardless of, okay, let's say,
So what you're saying to the crowd here is incorrect, okay?
Okay.
They can pave their parking lot, they can seal their parking lot, and they don't have to put down escrows for an engineer to make sure that the sealing and
well, if it's
paving
more
or
than a certain,
restriping is
if
done
if it's
correctly.
more
Now,
than
it's
a
another
certain
thing if you're
impervious
tearing up
coverage,
8 trees
they can't do
and
that.
developing and
If
subdividing
there's
your
more than
property.
certain impervious coverage, they can't do that. You have to
Well, you
submit a
then
grading
obtain
plan
a permit.
to the township for a
But do you
permit to do
understand
that.
what is being told here is that's not what's happening.
It
That's
is
not
what's happening. What do you mean?
They're striping a parking lot.
They're not striping it, they want to expand it.
No.
They want to expand the turnaround, and they want to add impervious down the
No.
driveway. What do you mean, no? Okay, explain to me.
Not expanding the parking lot.
So those little cutouts there are expansion of the parking area, correct?
No, there'll be some bump out paving.
There will be, so there will be expansion to the
No, we're
parking.
not expanding the number of parking spaces. What we're doing is we're
No,
bumping
I'm
out.
talking about impervious cut, there was a little bump out, so just so everybody knows.
But the amount of the
Is it-
expansion does not trigger the stormwater management code.
Now,
And well, first off, John, it could, and if it does, we will.
Stormwater.
It will.
And land development is not required, as you know. Land development isn't required to build a new house on an empty lot.
Okay. But going back to my original point is, why isn't Lower Merion School District doing this? Why are we paying for this? There's no reason why. Is anybody from Lower Merion School District here? Nobody from the school district is here? They want this. We're doing this.
We're doing this because we have the opportunity to have control of the polo field. Hartford Township has the opportunity.
So what?
That's what's at risk here.
Exactly.
We have a one-time deal where BlackRock needs our fields, and we have a little bit of a good standing.
But it still has to be through the proper channels, okay? Still has to
But
be.
can we maintain some control? Because this back and forth among the crowd isn't going to be helpful. Just finish your comments,
Yeah.
please.
So that's what we need proper permits, we need Lower Merion School District to be giving us a plan and showing us exactly what they're doing with the fields, how many spaces we'll need based on their seating. And this little Google sketch here doesn't do us anything. And I'm upset that I'm paying for you guys to be here.
So let me just tell you my opinion on that. I would prefer Haverford Township decide what our park and parking lot is going to look like. In the agreement, we are having Lower Merion pay for design and construction of anything that's done there. But
So
we
they
need
should be doing
our,
the plans, you're
we
right.
need our people to make sure our parking lot and driveway looks like we want it to.
Well, that's not
That is the
procedure.
plan.
The procedure is that they submit the plans, and then Mr. Pannoni reviews them on behalf of the township. You're right. we need to make sure it's good for Haverford Township. And that's the way it works. They pay for the plans. They submit 100% completed plans.
That is not how it
and
works.
that-
People do not submit plans for another person's property. People submit plans for their own property. This is going to be our
There are
property.
leases, people lease buildings all over the place,
And then
and
they-
they submit
and then they-
plans for their lease renovations. Don't
With-
tell me,
with
don't
the
try to
permission
tell
of the
me my
landlord.
business, okay? I won't tell you your business. You don't tell me my business.
You're not
People,
telling.
people can
People can do anything they want to do, right? But
permits
that's not what's
for
happening.
properties that they lease.
But no, that's not even worth it.
I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Elliott?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lynn Elliott from Polo Road, and I wanted to go last because so many people made so many great points, and I don't need to go over a lot of those. So I just have some specific things about the agreement that I want it clear that the funding to approve bus access and maneuverability under footnote 1 is to the parking lot. If you don't put in the words "to the parking lot," it could in fact be one day, somebody years from now, because this agreement lasts a long time, that could be, hey, wouldn't it be great for bus maneuverability if we had a bus pull off on Railroad Avenue? If you don't specify it's the parking lot, then something down the road could occur that would not be what everyone has agreed that it won't be. But some of us will be dead and gone by the time this agreement is over with. And the whole lights thing, I think everybody who was at the meeting in February 2023 heard them say absolutely no lights, no dugouts. That should be clear. There should be nothing in there about not contemplated at this time, because that just means that they're going to bring it up later. We all know Lower Merion School District has had this field in their sights since 2011, their Greater and Greener plan that called for the polo field to be developed for their school district using lights and artificial turf. Anyone who doesn't believe that, some of us have copies of what that Greater and Greener plan was. Scott Zeloff was the commissioner who was in charge of that plan at that time. So it's been in the works for them for 10 years, more than 10 years. No lights, no dugouts. Also, in terms of number 5E, everybody's already talked about the dawn. It should be just an 8 a.m. start time. It would be crazy to have school, and some of these schools have early before school practices to try to fit them in. We were told specifically February 2023 at that meeting that Black Rock Middle School students would be using the baseball and softball fields for March, April, May only. This agreement says during certain times. We were told March, April, May only. So the school has only those 3 months. They stated that specifically. In addition to that, it wasn't up there on your exhibit, so unless you took this statement out, I just want to read, Lower Merion agrees that no other public schools except Black Rock Middle School shall be issued permits for the use of any fields on the polo field without the written permission of Haverford Township. So the way that reads is if they get the written permission of Haverford Township, they can in fact use it for other schools within their system, other fields on the polo field other than baseball and softball, which is what we have been told. They are only using those 2 fields. No other public schools without written permission. Does this mean they email Dave Berman and he says, oh, you want to use it for Lower Merion High School for soccer? Go right ahead. I'll send you the written email. There needs to be a process. If there really is going to be the possibility of them using other fields for other schools other than Black Rock, that statement leaves open that they can do that only if they just get written permission. It doesn't state who has to give that permission, what the process will be. If there's any input from any of the residents as to whether Harriton can come and use another field for field hockey, we need to state specifically that it is Black Rock Middle School only. There is no reason to have that statement that Lower Merion, it should just be deleted altogether from this agreement. And once again, that footnote number 2, Lower Merion School District will use the bus drop-off pickup improvements to be installed for the polo field. It doesn't say to the parking lot. It just says improvements to the polo field for all bus passenger drop-offs and pickups. Could still be a bus pull-off on railroad to make bus drop-off and pickup easier. So if you don't state to the parking lot, that's really important. It also doesn't state where they're going to drop anybody off before those parking lot improvements are made. Are they going to use Railroad Avenue? Nobody has said what they are going to do before those improvements are made. Are we assuming that Joe DeRazio and his neighbor are going to be hunky-dory with all these things with the access road and the parking lot in time for spring? What are they going to do if Joe DeRazio says, or the neighbor says, and you can't do these improvements to the parking lot in time for spring? Where are they going to drop off? Railroad Avenue? What else are they going to do? And the agreement being, I think two of us, Kathy, you think this lasts 20 years? The way I read this term is that it's 10 years, and then the word thereafter, the agreement shall automatically renew for a new 10-year term. To me, I read that continually. Thereafter, it will always renew for an additional 10-year term. Am I misinterpreting that? Is the final agreement 20 years, and after 20 years, it all goes away? Or is it really in perpetuity every 10 years?
I can tell you that they wanted perpetuity, and that is not what we are doing. It's not in perpetuity.
So is 20 years the limit to the agreement? Is that what this says?
Talk about that a little bit.
The agreement says what it says, and we'll try to interpret it to our best benefit if we need to at that time.
Well, I hope you do what Diane Drentlaw says and go with a 5-year one that's going to be renegotiable, because it sounds to me as though Haverford Township has absolutely no out with any of this unless Lower Merion agrees to it. There is no circumstance other than a breach of contract, which we will not be happy to go to court about since we don't want to spend taxpayer dollars to do that. Other than a breach of contract, we have no way, the way I read this, of getting out of this contract. We are looking at a minimum 20 years with this, and I think they could argue that this is in perpetuity if it stays the way it is. And Laura, I just want to say, in your mailer to us, you said specifically that this will not be finalized until it is right. And I have heard so many different comments here tonight about things that people think really need to be redone. My understanding is this is coming up for a vote at the Board of Commissioners meeting second week of November. Is this going to be done incorporating everybody's comments?
So that's the reason for the meeting tonight, is to hear these comments, see what we can work in. It's not on the agenda yet for any meeting.
So will you delay this until this draft really is redone and these comments are incorporated? And I think most of them are pretty consistent. There are a few that may be in opposition, but most of them are pretty consistent.
I agree.
And it seems as though there is a lot to be worked out here, and the time frame just seems to me to be getting rushed. And I really would hate to see this just pushed through because everyone's trying to meet Lower Merion's spring practice. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me for the township to do that. So I hope you will really take your time with this and really do what you say. It won't be finalized until it's right, and it won't go to the Board of Commissioners until it really is right, incorporating all the comments of the neighbors here. So thank you. I know we were supposed to end a half hour ago. I really appreciate that you took the last person in the last row, which was me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lynn.
So we have a little bit of a time crunch. I know Commissioner Cavender has to go for family responsibilities. Did you need to say anything before you wrap things up? I'm going to let anybody who wants to talk, but.
You mean you want to hear more comments, or?
Well, there's at least one person who hasn't spoken yet.
Yeah, I don't want to rush anyone. I want to hear everyone's comments, so.
All right, let's get our last new speaker, or last fresh speaker.
Good evening. Jay Field, 144 Fawn Lane. So I'm here tonight to represent a group of people that I think are being overlooked. We're talking about the schools, but we're not talking about the Little League Baseball. So I have a copy of the schedule here that clearly indicates Lower Merion Little League using these fields, but I don't see Haverford Township on this at all. So, and I know for a fact that we could use more field space, and I know for a fact that there's going to be a new baseball league that's being designed right now for 13-year-olds. So my question is, where's Haverford Township Little League? Where's Babe Ruth?
I'm going to ask Park and Rec to comment on whether there are any applications for those permits.
We actually do have usage on the fields, Polo's baseball field on Monday, Wednesday, and I believe Friday was added. Yeah. So Monday, Wednesday, and Friday are older. I guess it's a 13, 15 to 18.
Yeah, and
HTBL, yeah.
HTBL.
So,
yes.
All right, thank you. I don't see it on my schedules, but maybe.
It should be yeah.
So I don't know for all of you if you understand all this, and I was trying to make this point last week. We only have so many 60, 90 baseball fields in the township, and that is what that baseball field is, the baseball field. Why is that needed? Quite clearly for, as kids get older, they hit the ball farther. You need a deeper 60, 90 is 60 feet to the home plate, 90s the base paths. So how many of those fields do we have in the township? Not enough. So we really need that baseball field for the older kids in this township. And there's more leagues being created. And that field, to my knowledge this year, was not used for Babe Ruth baseball. Maybe you can correct me.
The permits were available. They did not use all their time that was permitted. But the permits were, actually, right now, we have 4 days a week on that field. We have Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday.
Well, on this sheet that I have, and again, this may not be accurate.
Yeah, you might be looking at the fall.
I am.
Spring.
Yeah.
That's the.
Okay. But what I'm looking at is Lower Merion Little League, Monday through Friday here, Monday through Sunday. They're having their Little League. So it bothers me when I go to Little League meetings and the president of Lower Merion Little League is using a field in Haverford Township. He's has the same issue that we have. He has no field space. So he's playing his games on that field when we have kids that could be using that field.
And right now, Jay, they could be using that field. It's that, then they were previously. A few years ago, they were using it.
When I coached, we played at least 3 games a week there.
Right, and that's what I mean. And that you still could be playing 3 games a week there, or
Right.
4 games if you want to play on Sundays.
Right.
So,
And when I did play there, I'll just add with the parking issues, on a Saturday, that parking lot was a zoo. And it was jam-packed because it wasn't just baseball playing, there were soccer games going on. So I really think this whole bus situation is going to be an issue because there's just not going to be enough parking spots available. But that's just,
and as you know, Jay, very few bar fields in Haverford Township have adequate parking. Grange has absolutely none. It's a 60 and 90. Westgate has very little. Elwell has
that's
very
why,
little.
and that's why I think we need to preserve as many spots available for parking.
Right.
You and I just talked about our own lot. So it's nothing against you. I'm just giving you the facts here. What I think is being omitted, we're talking about Lower Merion High School, Lower Merion Middle School, but we're not talking about the independent leagues. And Lower Merion Little League has nothing to do with the high school or the middle school. So. I think,
I can sympathize with you because Elwell Field had no parking and they park in front of my house, which is fine because we live next to a baseball field and it's nice.
that's part of living next to a park, and there's no parking. So thank you very much.
All right, everybody's had a chance to talk. I know we need to wrap things up. Kathy, can we discuss your comments offline? Your next comment? Are you talking about the bus situation?
1 second.
Okay, bring it up.
I just want to suggest that you clarify section 6, because it really looks like they're not parking on the field. And then it said, except under agreed upon use of the polo field parking lot, but that's not stipulated what that agreed upon use is.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
That is a change I noted that needs to be made as well.
You're very right on that change. Thank you.
With that, thank you again for coming. I know we got heated there a little bit. I'm glad we exchanged the information. There's a lot of information for us to digest. And again, we're going to do our best to accommodate what we can. So thanks again, everybody, and have a great night.
Thank you.